Going live in three, two, one. Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Time Talk with Eagle 3D Streaming. I am Quentin Anderson, the host of today's show, and today we have Derek Chan as our guest. Derek is the founding principal at LendLease. Thank you so much for being here. LendLease is an architecture visualization studio headquartered in New York City. Derek has been involved with ArchViz industry for nearly 2 decades, and his studio is a market leader that specializes in working with large-scale real estate developers. Their work has been part of key development and marketing campaigns for Google and large real estate developers like Related, CIM, and LendLease. Derek graduated from Princeton and with a major in architecture, and received his master's in architecture from Harvard Graduate School of Design. So he's probably the smartest person we've ever had on this podcast. He was previously an associate principal architect at the architecture firm Kohn Pedersen Fox, and he remains an active member of the American Institute of Architects, also known as AIA. Why Derek is in particularly excited with pixel streaming. Their mission has always been to deliver industry-leading photoreal visualizations for the AEC industry. They are excited that Unreal with pixel streaming has finally allowed them to deliver their commitment to a photoreal experience in real time and on a universally accessible platform. And their clients are excited about it too. And we're excited to have you here today.
Cool. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So, Derek, before we kick it off, I'll just briefly describe the format of this show in case this is anyone's first time watching. This is a live show, which means that Derek and I are talking in real time. I mean, we love real-time technology. So please, please, please don't hesitate to ask questions. Derek is a very knowledgeable and very innovative individual, and so I'm sure he's happy to answer anything that may be on your minds. So yeah, Derek, let's learn a little bit more about you. You've always sort of had architecture as a roadmap in your life. How did you kind of get started, and how did you arrive where you are today?
Cool. Great. Yeah. Well, thanks for having us on. Happy to chat. This is an exciting topic. I've been tooling around in ArchViz, like using software to render, our industry calls it, real estate, since the early 2000s. It's always been, layering on more different software. It's always been 3D Max sort of in the background, despite all the, if anyone knows these softwares, and then, versus all the CAD stuff that you use to do your work. But I was an architect, I went to school for it. I was a full-time architect. But in the background was always sort of ArchViz. I loved the way it sort of, it's immediate. I love the way that it's about selling the idea of the project versus like a lot of the administrative stuff that goes into creating architectural work. And so that's really been where my passion is for almost 2 decades now. It's sort of always related to architecture, but about getting it to market, which is exciting. Even like when I was a full-time architect, I had a side business trying to like run an outsourced business of rendering, it into selling it back to architects, and it was a challenge. But I realized that commitment to really high quality work was something that I was passionate about, and so I created a professional company to really deliver that level of quality, to our clients. And so that's how I ended up in it. We work, anyone who knows the ArchViz industry, I guess a lot of your viewers don't, but those do. We use very, standard things like, as I said, 3D Studio Max, taking stuff out of the CAD softwares, and our rendering is in V-Ray, which I'm sure is familiar to some of your viewers as well, and sort of how we traditionally created our stills and our animations and so forth and things like that.
So
that's sort of the journey to where we are. Yeah, go ahead.
And so what drew you to the visualization component of architecture? Did you always kind of have an interest in that component, or what? How did that become?
Yeah, so when you're in an architecture firm, especially when you're sort of starting out, it's a very important part of how architects deliver their work. There's a lot of design of like drawings and like working out the 3D space, but it's gotten increasingly important over the years. But the ability to create an image that can sell a client on what you're doing is like very important, and that always pushes projects forward. It means you get to go to I work in a very big firms. It means you get to go to the meetings. It means you get to talk to all the principals. It really kind of moves stuff forward. But it was also, you also have to be very clear about what the design intent is of what you're doing, because you have one image to sell an entire architectural idea. And so that was really interesting to me. And so, when we started a professional business to service clients, like originally it was servicing architects and helping do the same thing. Over time, what RedLeaf does now is we service larger developers, and we sort of do a niche where we work alongside a lot of architecture firms that I idolized when I was sort of going through school and growing up. But we sort of get to work alongside them. Our projects are big. They're typically in the millions of square feet when we engage. And so they're complex, where there's multiple architects, there's interior designers, there's landscape architects. And each of those is like super amazing and interesting to us. But they're always at different stages of development. And so the visualization, what we're passionate about, is allows us to sort of sync those things together. Oftentimes we have to push forward a schematic sketch of a landscape into like fully real trees so that the whole vision can come together or something like that. So, the visualization is like it kind of pushes everything to real and sort of pushes through concepts very clearly and fast. And that's what's passionate for me and for those in our studio. I don't know if that's a really answer to your question.
No, it definitely gives some insight. And so now I'm kind of wondering, when one of your customers engages with RedLeaf, what are some of the skill sets that you guys are bringing to the table? Do you also have interior designers? And obviously having such a strong background in architecture itself, other than just visualizing it, is probably appealing. Or why are some of your customers engaging with you?
Yeah. So our studio is full of, we'll call them recovering architects.
Yeah.
And, so our customers, our clients really enjoy working with us because we can fill the gap of what's needed. So, we're typically, let's say we're showing a new master plan development where there's like 2 different architects involved, and also we're trying to sell like the street light so that they can go to market and say like, this is going to be an amazing place with all these new buildings by these great architects, and we're going to have this market, and it's going to be vibrant. Those buildings are like kind of schematically designed, so we'll fill in the gaps of if there are missing design, but typically designers are pretty good at that. But then there's like the retail component, so we'll actually design out or style the appropriate retailers and bring in the appropriate people to sometimes we'll hire models to like photograph the right people so that the population, the place feels right. We'll design the pavilion that has to go in the middle to sort of like bring life to the place. So we sort of like infill design or infill style all the pieces that pull it together. So that's sort of the unique component. And then, what gets us creatively excited and what works in the market is like this commitment to like super hyper real. I never want to say aesthetic, but like that's what we're committed to. And we find that forces very clear thinking. We are committed to that sort of representation, sort of putting you there, making it real, trying to get people to eye level as much as possible, putting you into place.
And is that why
that's what we bring?
Is that why you have such a focus in on highly photoreal visualizations? Is because that's what's necessary for buy-in, or why is that commitment so important for you?
Yeah, so that's that's a great question. It's important in the market, like we work with very elevated projects. It is important to stand out, to have that realism, and to get buy-in both from the public and public engagement, and also even internally, these projects have a lot of stakeholders, and their taste in quality has ratcheted up over the years, where like if you want the most senior person on the real estate team to sign off on a project, he or she typically needs to see something that feels like it was built already yesterday. Like that's so that level of quality is needed both internally and externally to market.
And if I caught that properly, your or one of the technology tools that you use was 3ds Max and V-Ray for some of the
Yeah,
renderings. Is that kind of your go-to for
yeah,
static images and maybe animations?
it has been. That is changing quickly, and I mean all this is sort of segueing in a very not artificial, totally organic way that like Unreal, especially Unreal 5 for us, has basically allowed real time what we did, before, and that is very important. You know, that level of engagement that we're going for, both from public engagement and also internal engagement, understanding the project, is like you can't beat, being in a space in Unreal 5 with, Lumen and everything that's going on with it has allowed the sort of like the fidelity of our static images into real time. And so we are transitioning definitely for animation, interactive work. That's going to Unreal. There is like no question. I mean, you just can't, like from a production standpoint, anyone who's been in ArcViz knows this, like, and has tried to like make this transition. It's like things that took hours and days to kind of work through and iterate through is instant. I mean, you can't, it's incredible what these engines can do. And they can also, for us, we work on huge projects with, traditionally we haven't sent, even though our technology, like we typically don't use render farms outside our office. We have it in-house because any one of our project files, by the time you load it up to render, maybe has like 10 gigabytes of data, and you can't just pipe that stuff up and down and iterate. But Unreal is able to just like chew up all that data and, spit it up real time. So all that stuff is, we're moving that way. Stills, we'll see. We have a very clear pipeline as to how we deliver certain things. So I think, we'll see. But stills, might become part of a smaller chunk of a really great master model in Unreal.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Unreal is amazing. But speaking of data, we have our first question that's come in.
Sure.
From his perspective, how does he see the industry growing concerning data-driven automated roles-based architecture and automatic design?
Yeah. Automatic design through data. I guess I wonder if there's a specific use case they have in mind. But does that mean like generative design by using data, like forms from data, or I guess I need to interpret the question.
Yeah, and I'll share it again. I think I'm kind of interpreting it the same way you are. How does he see the industry growing concerning data-driven automated roles-based architecture and automatic design? So perhaps using data in ways to drive data in ways to automate the design and architecture process.
We stay close to the architecture industry, but we're like, visualization. So we tend to pivot from what all the architects are doing, like into trying to get to market. But from what I know in the industry, I mean, I think it's, I'm not sure I'm in a position to answer that that clearly for this user, but I know that like, from what we do, part of this isn't going to answer the question directly, but I think the power of Unreal and pixel streaming, specifically getting online, pixel streaming is getting this stuff online is a critical part of how we see this playing out from our perspective, because as soon as you get users into this experience, you can then pull back out the data of where are they looking, where are they going, what are they doing there, how much time are they spending there, like this is like a critical part of it. So I think all the data of people experiencing the space and what you can pipe in terms of like, I guess, use cases of even just, well, I guess you can put in real-time data, so like what traffic is doing and so forth. But like from our perspective, it's like linking to sell sheets or like the latest, iteration of a model, like stuff like that is very, I don't know, generative to design, which I think is what the user's asking for. Probably not the best people to ask that question,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
No, well, no, and I think that was a good answer. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can use data to automate design. Um, but just thinking about design a little bit, when did your team start getting involved or using Unreal Engine?
We've investigated it, I'd say, for a couple of years, but I think it was earlier. Honestly, it was like earlier this year with Unreal 5, with Lumen, that we felt that finally the quality was there for us to like do what we wanted. So in the past, we've done a lot of 360 tours and sort of still a lot of the software we use. They're very labor intensive, take a lot to produce a 360 and sort of make sure it's like all has the post-production and everything else. But we never went to like a fully interactive 360 walkthrough because it felt like a video game, for lack of a better word. And like now we think we've hit some, it's become something real. So then we've really committed a team to it. We've committed to looking at the creative side to make sure we can achieve our quality. We've invested in sort of like, making sure we're working through all the technical details and making sure it syncs well online. Basic things like making sure the experience is seamless, the load up is instant. I can kind of share where we're. Is it helpful if I share something as to like our process as to how we got here in the last little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look.
All right. Very simply. Here. Very short, but I think it just kind of clearly, is my screen up here?
Yes, sir.
This pretty clearly spells out how we ended up where we are. So this is like typical static design rendering, lack of better words. And these are worked out over a number of, actually probably a year or two on this, just like constant iterations with the client of like a couple viewpoints, like work through design. So this is like where it ended up at the end. Then they built it. We went and documented it to, these are maybe a year before this. So we went and documented it and sort of said, okay, like how close were we? And we feel pretty close. They certainly worked through a number of design elements. And then earlier this year, we said, well, why don't we just take this all the way there? Can we get it into Unreal, into something that feels the same? And we could. And I think from that point on, we were like, this is a no-brainer. Like we have to do this. Let me see if I have a link. So what we did was we built it up, and for us it was, so we kind of built this pre-sequence so someone always has something to look around, but then once you're in it, we got kind of the subtle movement. It adds a bit of life. There's nothing replacing being able to like move through a real-time space, and this level of fidelity we had never been able to achieve before in a real-time application. So that's how we ended up here.
Yeah, and just to clarify or make sure I'm understanding, so the renders that you shared initially, were those V-Ray or was that UE5?
Static V-Ray, the original ones.
Okay, so that's so the
and original. And then it was the photography.
Got it. So the initial ones were static V-Ray, yeah. And then the pixel stream was actually the UE5.
UE5, that's right. Yeah, we sort of just skipped over UE4. If I was honest.
Yeah. They made some leaps and bounds. Holy smokes, we got a lot more. We got lots of questions that came in. If you're ready.
Okay.
So we did get a clarification.
I guess so.
On the data-driven one, so I'll throw that at you.
Okay.
If we still don't feel like we can answer it, we'll just move on to the next one. So the clarification is, if you have a shopping mall with number of square feet, then the bathrooms, hallways, etc. can be generated automatically based on roles. This is how many per square foot, basic example. Or this many per square foot, basic example.
I think what they're asking about is like how much can you like automate optimizing designs and sort of like, if a tenant, if the owner wants to change a square footage, how fast can you write something that like will change it? I think that's going to, people will continue to develop tools, I think, that will just make that faster and better. That's not our zone of expertise, designing, let's say, a retail. Like, I think there's really great, massive retail architects or small ones that will create this asset that will be used. So I think the answer is it's going to create a big role. But, from all my years of designing, I think it's a little bit like AI generative design, where like it depends on what your inputs are. So like, I think generative design is always like whoever sets up the parameters already kind of knows where it could go. And so like as parameters change, it always kind of generates in a specific direction. I'm rare to sort of see something where it's just like, oh, that's actually viable and not something I never ever expected without running the data through it. Usually there's like okay, that's interesting. Why don't we make it look like this as an aesthetic sort of move, and then you run the data again. It sort of optimizes towards something that's cool, but also optimizable. I'm going to leave it there. That's not really our, as much as I can say.
Yeah, I mean, answered it way better than I could. So next question is, have you seen a slow on demand for outside companies doing visualization with the flood of real-time rendering tools that have enabled architectural companies to do their own renderings?
It's different. As I said, we serve developers directly. We don't most of the time. We just still do some work with architects. Our niche typically isn't to, I think I know what the users, so yes, the level of output of visualizations from architecture studios has gone, is really top notch, in a way that has filled a niche that we honestly never really served that much. But when it comes time to turn to market, there's a world, I was an architect, there's a world that's like slightly different. Like, we love the architects work with. I think by far, we do design to infill, add life to a space, but we're not going to replace Norman Foster. We're not going to or his, Foster and Company. We're not going to replace SOM. We're not going to replace these amazing studios. But their focus is on design of the building and sort of what the public space could be. And we sort of fill the gap of like taking that to market and like actually giving it the place, actually giving it the life, with giving it the right lighting. And we always talk about in the studio, like, well, you got to show the place as if it was like in its best condition on the best hour, the best day, at the best time of year. Like, what could this really be? And there is a sort of like world there, that is important to, that is slightly different than how architects represent their space, which is more about selling the design, selling what it could be, but it's about selling the design. I mean, that's what architects do. They need to sell their design to their clients. So it's a slightly different niche.
Awesome.
So the answer is not for us.
Yeah.
Not for the niche we fill.
Yeah, well, and just seeing those renderings, it's like, oh my gosh, those are really good. Next question. Yeah. Do you create your own assets, such as furniture or landscaping plants, since what architects usually send is bad geometry? If you do, what software do you use and what is your process?
There's a couple questions there, I guess. We create, okay. So as far as like furniture and stuff like that, we either build it in-house or we certainly do use outside sources, whatever's most efficient. There's a lot of stuff that has to go into a scene. We build what we can't find and we use what we can find, but we do represent whatever was designed or is needed. So sometimes it's like just fill it up, whatever. Sometimes there's very specific pieces, and in that case, we have to go and do that. So whatever the client needed. The bad geometry, yeah, you kind of have to roll with the punches. And that's partly what our clients like about us is, we'll often get stage sets, for lack of a better word. Architects have been designing through 2 or 3 specific views of their building. And when it comes time to go to market, you have to show a different aspect of the building, and those design intents have to be interpreted across a different part of the building, in which case we'll just build them out in-house. Even with Unreal, we'll still use 3D Max as our modeling engine. We'll take, if the architects will give us stuff, if there's architects listening in Revit, and in Revit or Rhino, or sometimes SketchUp, and we'll take that in. But typically the modeling is Max. Then Unreal is our visualization engine.
Awesome. Yeah. And so, once you have everything in Unreal, I know the last leg of sometimes delivering an experience is deploying it on a browser. How did you come up with that idea? Why delivering on a browser versus sending them an app?
Yeah.
What was the reasons?
Yeah. I mean, everything up till now, like all the stuff I'm talking about, like what gets us excited, like, we can do all this stuff that we couldn't do before. We can get people in the scene, like that gets studio jazz. But ultimately, what is the payoff for our clients and our customers, right? And they don't have the GPUs to run this stuff. You saw our stuff. It doesn't you need some powerful computers, or you have to have invested in those computers to make sure it runs. If you have a new version, you're asking them to download gigabytes at a time. It was just a no-brainer for us. We had to get this thing online. So the first thing we did once we realized we wanted to use the technology was to figure out how to get pixel streaming to be a viable product. And we are customer focused in what we do, making sure that the pixel aspect ratio is matching the browser. That was something that we tweaked up front. Finding the right asset that's animation or a temporary 360 so that there's initial uptick, because our clients are generally older. They're not sitting around to wait 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes for something to load up if they don't have something to do. They're gone. So finding these little things to help that experience along the way are things we're constantly working on and we'll continue to work on. And then features that they'll find beneficial once they're in it. There's just so much payoff to come once you're in the space that we're excited to flesh out. I lost track of your question. I don't think I answered it.
No, I think it was spot on, because one of the things that I noticed about your experiences is that you are thinking about the customer. When I click that link, I have something already in my hands that I can interact with, and it's a space, and it's sort of like a spherical rendering, right? That I can click and move around. Yeah. So as soon as I hit that page, you're thinking about the customer. And would you say that's maybe one of the themes of RedLeaf, is just always thinking about the customer and what that end deliverable? Because at the end of the day, we're getting sign off on architecture, right? Or we're trying to convince someone of buying or moving forward with an architectural design. Is that?
Yeah. Well, typically get someone to buy. So, the bar for that is high.
Yeah.
Whether it's buy-in from someone senior, comes to your property and buy it. So, definitely we want seamless experiences. Our visuals, we clearly are labors of love. We want them, but we want the whole experience to be as amazing as the visuals themselves. But you got to get people there. You can't have them drop off before they get there. And I think with pixel streaming and everything else, it's going to be Easter egg after Easter egg, which is exciting. That's what we're building through, and I think our customers will do the same thing.
Cool. Yeah, and we're kind of coming up at the end of the half hour. Is there anything else you'd like to share or to mention, or maybe talk about, the future, the next step, what you think may be for RedLeaf and you guys?
Next step. We think it's a growing, we're invested in it. We think there's so much. We didn't even talk about, for real estate, it's immersive. It's there. It's on the web. We're excited. We didn't talk about what it means for metaverse or anything else, which I don't even want to really touch. But it's a very natural, seamless transition for us. It's a place you want to be. That's what we want to create, and we're excited to everything we're going to develop here. So, but we'll just leave it at that. We got interesting things coming out, so keep an eye out. But we're excited about it. pixel stream's great. It's part of what makes it function for us. It's not separate from what's great about Unreal.
Yeah. Yes, we are excited too to see what you guys do in the next leg. And Derek, thank you so much for swinging by. I really appreciate you taking the time to share some of your insights. I mean, obviously, you guys do a lot of beautiful work in one of the most competitive markets in the world. So my hat definitely goes off to you. I'm Quentin with Real Time Talk. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications to this channel to make sure that we get this information into as much people as we can. Derek, thank you again for being on our show, and we will catch you on the next podcast. All right. Thanks, everyone.